Hello, folks, and we are live. Welcome to CaliBased. I'm so happy you could join me. And I have a guest tonight. I'm so excited. I don't have guests a lot. This is only my second guest. And my first guest was just kind of my buddy, so he doesn't really count. Sorry, Justin. You don't count that much. So I have a real guest on. He's an actual musician, super talented, hilarious, and he's got a great story. And I can't wait to introduce you guys to him. A lot of you guys probably already know him, but let me bring in the chat first, and then I will bring him in, and we will get going. So stand by with me really fast here, folks. And I am streaming on Odyssey for the first time. I've never streamed on Odyssey, so I'm going to see if I can find the chat over there. Let's see. Oh, you guys are in the chat already over there. How about that? I don't know how to pop out the chat window though. Let's see. Aha. Think I got it. Stand by. Yeah. Wow. All right. That kind of works. I don't know if we got anybody over on the Rumble side. Let's check it out. Hold that one out really quick. Sorry, guys. I should have had this set up before, but you know, I'm still learning. We're learning together. It's fun. Learning is fun. All righty. We should be set to go. Let's bring in our guest. So I would like to introduce you to the Foundring. Hello, sir.
Hey, man.
How are we doing?
Fantastic. It's great to be here. I'm actually just getting the Rumble and Odyssey chats open as well.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, I'm so glad you could join me. Thank you so much for coming on and taking the time.
It's an honor to be your first official guest. No offense to Justin.
He doesn't care. He's not watching. Yeah. He doesn't care about me anyway. So, yeah.
Well, I care. So that's what matters. That's what counts.
Dude, you have such an interesting story. So, why don't you just start off? Just give a quick introduce yourself to the audience.
Right on. My name's Kylan. I'm a California native. I guess I use the moniker Foundring when I'm writing spicy songs, but really I'm a musician who classically trained, and then I got hooked by ragtime at a young age and sort of deviated in that direction and joined a band and toured the world a little bit, did that, sowed my wild oats a little bit and had that fun, checked that off my list. And then sort of slowed down in my middle age, and I had a kid, and she's 11. So I spent a lot of time with her, raising her and sticking around, having a good time playing gigs here and there. Obviously that changed and went sour a few years ago. I lost all of my gigs and then was needing a creative outlet, I guess, and saw that there weren't very many people writing songs about what was happening in the world. And I thought I would, throw my hat in the ring and give it a shot. And it just took off and here we are.
So when you say you lost all your gigs, that was at the beginning of COVID?
Right. I should clarify that the trend towards the decline, at least where on the West Coast, where I feel culturally we've gone in a different direction, and it's more of a wasteland as opposed to the thriving cultural scene that they like to think it is out here, but it's not.
Accurate description.
So we were heading in that direction pre-COVID. And yes. I was losing most of my gigs pre-COVID, but I had several stable ones. I was a church organist for a number of years. I had regular gigs that I went in and played. Schools in town, I would go and I would play musicals, work with their choirs, but everything like that stopped.
Now, pre-COVID, cultural decline and all that stuff, would you say that you started losing gigs because you were being a little bit outspoken, or was it just happening?
Happening.
Gotcha.
Happening. Okay. And we can get into that a little bit.
I want to get into all that, but I do want to kind of start, earlier on with that, because I want to know you. I want to know how you got into music. So when did you first start playing piano? Because that's what really drew me to you. First off, was like, oh, this guy's really good. Like it was, I like the songs are funny, like that's great. But I I love music, and I grew up by my dad's a deadhead, a bootleg recorder, and so I grew up with just obscure music and really talented musicians, and being told what to look for, and just seeing you play the piano is just, oh, okay, I got to talk to this guy. It's fantastic. So, what got you into the piano? How old were you?
Oh, so I think a lot of people don't realize I've been playing for 32 years. I've been playing piano for 32 years.
You can tell.
That's a long time. And I think in this day and age, there's so many impressive musicians out there. The internet sort of made everything a little bit smaller in the world, and it made it harder to impress people. But there's something to be said about when you put your time into a craft for a long time. Yeah. Anyway, in the beginning, I was inspired by, well, my family we're all musical. My older sister played piano. My dad played piano. He was into the Dead too. My parents were kind of hippie types that then kind of sold out and went the corporate, just like the story that a lot of people that went through in this generation. And I don't know. I started doing classical music from a really young age. I started reading music. I was really drawn to just. Sure, we had Super Nintendos and stuff back then, but we didn't have the constant screen access that kids do today, and all the amazing stimulation that is just constant. We're inundated with, and I felt that a good outlet for my ADHD, for lack of a better term, was just sitting down at the piano and reading through music. And I wasn't very good at it at first, but then I realized I can get better. I just read music all day.
So you had a piano in your home?
We had a piano, a dinky old upright piano up against the wall, and I pounded away on that for a number of years.
So did your parents get you music? And
there was we had a lot of intro music that my sister was playing, some intro piano books, but I didn't like any of that stuff. I went through some of my dad's old piano music. He was a boomer type that grew up, and then when in the 70s a movie was released called The Sting, and that it won Best Picture. Robert Redford, Paul Newman. Yeah. It's a great film. Back when Hollywood actually made good stories and good films. It had a soundtrack with ragtime.
My dad would love you.
Oh, yeah. Well, see, that's why I feel like I'm getting a little bit of popularity among the boomer audience, because I do harken back to the older stuff. I'm a ragtime pianist. That's what I do. I play the.
I'm a boomer at heart, so.
Hey, I think a lot of us are, especially us ragtime piano players. I think we came from a different era, but that's a different story. So yeah, I did find my dad's collection of Scott Joplin, right? So when I mentioned the Sting, because in the soundtrack to the Sting, they use the Entertainer, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right, and so many people recognize that theme, but they might not necessarily know what it's called, who wrote it, or even that it is called.
I don't. Yeah, who is that?
So that's called The Entertainer, and it is written by Scott Joplin, who's the king of ragtime, the greatest ragtime composer, who also wrote the Maple Leaf Rag, which a lot of people know. Right.
I'm not sure if I know that. It kind of sounds familiar, but I'm not sure. I probably saw it in like an old timey movie.
Exactly. So this ragtime style is all based around what we call syncopation. And syncopation is putting the emphasis on the offbeat. So instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, you're going 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. So
it's like reggae.
It is, exactly. But ragtime did it first. So instead of instead of just boom, 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 it's like. And
I never would have heard it. I never would have heard it until you pointed it out. That's brilliant.
What you get is it's the phenomenon of ragged time. That's why it's called ragtime. And when you put the emphasis on the offbeat instead of on what we call the downbeat in music, it kind of makes you want to anticipate it with your body, especially if you're really listening to it and getting into it. So it makes you want to dance. So ragtime music was centered around dancing. And back in the day, and you're going to get a kick out of this. So the idea was suddenly you had think about 1900 America, cultural melting pot. all these different cultures coming in. It's a whole new situation. America's just taken off. And musically, that was represented in the ragtime style. So a lot of ragtime is very composed in that it's all written down like classical music, and it's got structure like classical music, and it's got harmonies like classical music, but it is infusing this rhythm, this syncopated, ragged rhythm into the classical music and tweaking it, like changing it a little bit in a way that is fresh and new. And syncopation had existed before in classical music, but they had never, like reggae, which is just constant, they had never taken a piece and this did syncopation all the way through. And as a result, it made people want to dance. And at the time, it was taboo, is because actually what it was doing was it was bringing the races and cultures together, where you had the white European harmonies and structure, musical structure, with the black African rhythms of the syncopation, and that was coming from the blues and that culture, and they jammed them together and they made ragtime. And it was the first truly unique American genre of music. It was the first one that we created that was unique to that was our offering. And of course, it quickly turned into swing, and then jazz, and then rock and roll, and then pop today. It is all, and I'm not saying this just because I'm a ragtime nerd and I'm biased towards ragtime music. All the pop and rock and reggae and all that stuff that we know today gets its roots in ragtime and syncopation. And if you listen to pop music, everything is coming in on the offbeats. It's not all the time. It's not all straight. So it is, in a sense, ragtime, but it's branched off and we call it lots of different things. So the reason I said this was
all these TikTok dancers basically
they're ragtime. That's right. So the reason I said this is funny, it should be funny to you, is because it was considered a everything goes in cycles, right? And today here I am, the controversial ragtime guy. Ragtime music was controversial back in the day because they thought it was, well, just like in rock and roll, that the parents thought the kids were going to go crazy with the rock and roll. It was the same thing. The older generations didn't want all the young people dancing with each other. And in fact, ragtime dancing was made illegal in numerous counties, including Santa Cruz County.
I believe it. Wasn't this during the time of the Prohibition as well?
Pre-Prohibition.
Oh, it was?
Okay. Pre-Prohibition, I'm going to say 1913, a law was passed in Santa Cruz County that said if you dance to ragtime music, you go to jail for 30 days and or $100 fine, which is a lot of money at the time. And at least one arrest was made, and I have a newspaper clipping.
Well, it's all coming full circle with you, isn't it?
It's so funny how we're there right now.
All right. Well, I do want to continue a little bit on the music. Like, so what are some specific musicians then that, really that you maybe model your style after,
for sure,
that really, influenced you?
So obviously I got into the ragtime young. I learned to play the Maple Leaf Rag by Scott Joplin by the time I was about 8. So Scott Joplin was my first kind of ragtime inspired love, but I still loved classical music. Edvard Grieg is a Norwegian composer. Many people know him for writing this song "In the Hall of the Mountain King," the piece.
Oh yeah, everybody knows that.
Everyone knows that, but I was really
stuck in my head this whole stream. Thank you.
Well,
you got to play something else really soon.
Check it out. So, and we can talk about this in a moment when I talk about what my career online and stuff. But that song is actually in the Inspector Gadget theme. But just the Inspector Gadget theme is the ragtime version. So check this out. In the Hall of the Mountain King is the classical. The swung ragtime version is Inspector Gadget. So it takes this and it turns it into ragtime.
What a trip. That's great.
People have no idea that
I grew up on Inspector Gadget. That was my show, man.
Me too. And that composer specifically says, I ragtimeified In the Hall of the Mountain King by Edvard Grieg. So we get surrounded by this stuff all the time. We just have no, especially in video games. And I can talk about that in a moment too. So yeah, I was really into some of these more expressive classical composers like Grieg, Rachmaninoff, Tchaikovsky, those guys. And when I started, like around 13 or 14, I discovered Keith Jarrett. Do you know who Keith Jarrett is? Mm-mm. He's a pretty well-known modern jazz pianist, but he also does classical. But most of what he does is improvisational. And he has a performance where basically what Keith Jarrett does is he sits down at a piano for a recital and makes everything up on the spot. Just him solo, just one man, doesn't prepare at all and just comes up with it and creates epic symphonies just from his head. It's inspirational. So he had
those people are just, I can't understand them.
Well,
but
it was on a different level for someone like me who was I loved having the sheet music. It was like a crutch for me almost. Asked me to improvise something for an hour when I was younger. That's it. I need the music, right? Then I found Keith Jarrett and I said, this is possible. Someone can just do this. So he recorded a very famous concert in Cologne, Germany. And in the 74 something, 75. And it's just an hour of him making something up. But that went viral pre-internet and is now the #1 selling solo piano album in history. The Keith Jarrett Cologne concert, #1 in history. And I fell in love with it. So I just became obsessed with that. And I studied it and studied it and studied it. And I actually ended up learning and performing it when I was 18 in Santa Cruz. So I got really into him. But then high school, college, I started listening to bands like Radiohead, Coldplay, back when they first released their first album, stuff like that, more experimental stuff. So then I started.
It's hard for me not to make the joke right now.
Yeah. You can control yourself. But so, yeah, I started, but the first pieces I started learning on the piano to sing were Radiohead pieces, basically.
Oh, cool.
That was what I really wanted to I was like, I can take this and I can make my own jazzy swinging versions of it. So I did that for a while. And then my musical rebirth happened after I dropped out of college when I was 19. And in my 20s, I spent the entire decade studying what we call stride piano. Stride piano. I don't know if you've ever heard of stride piano. Negative. Stride piano is an offshoot of ragtime that is all improvised. So it's not written down. And it is like ragtime, which has a lot of jumping around in the left hand. If you think about it, back in the day, especially during the Great Depression in the 30s, you wouldn't necessarily have the money to afford a whole band, right? So
the one-man band thing?
Kind of. Or if you had a piano player, you might say, hey, we can't afford the bass player tonight. Can you double it up? In other words, work overtime and give us a nice bass line along with the other stuff up here. So the piano player had to step up. So that era created the greatest pianists who have ever lived, period. Grew up and came into their own in the 20s, 30s, 40s. And this is when, George Gershwin, a lot of these guys that some people might know. But the style is what we call stride piano, involves a striding across the piano. So instead of, I don't know how well you can see here.
Is that like Bruce Hornsby?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So instead of using two hands to do this motion of a boom chuck motion, so I'm using two hands to do that, right? Well, if you play for 30 years, you can learn how to do that motion in one hand. So instead of doing boom chick, you go right, and you do that boom chick. It's kind of hard to do with this angle, but the idea is the left hand can do the bass line and the syncopation rhythm, and that frees the right hand to do fun stuff. And it's ferociously difficult. Like, it is a lot of muscle memory and just playing for years and years and years. So when I was around 1920, I discovered this style. Particularly Fats Waller is one guy, and Art Tatum. Those are the two, Fats Waller and Art Tatum. And I basically spent 20 to 30 my years just trying to learn how to do what they were doing. And that's when YouTube first showed up. So I was one of the first, if not the first, to learn and make amateur homemade videos of ragtime and stride piano in the very early days of YouTube.
That's kind of where my next questions were. So this is had to have been around what, 2003, 2004?
No. So YouTube actually didn't start until 2005.
Okay.
But it was like late. No one was actually starting to use YouTube until 2006, and then 2007.
So I remember I first discovered YouTube when I was working. I mean, I could mention when I was working for a company called Magnolia, and we had a warehouse back in Hayward, and our scheduler used to always be on YouTube. He was just sitting there, and it was the Wild West days back then.
It was.
I mean, you would find anything on YouTube. It was just like the only rules, no nudity. So it was just anything. It was horrific stuff that you'd find on there. So many
people, well, yeah, but so many people don't know that have grown up today that I know I'm sounding like the boomer now, but it really was a different feel on the internet. And I come from that era. And that's why I'm so surprised at all these people that are so shocked at the things that I'm like, I grew up on this. I grew up listening to Adam Sandler albums where he's just as vulgar as possible. So South Park came out when I was in 7th grade. And that we all got into a room. I remember that when that season came out, and we just watched them all. It was amazing.
Well, South Park's still relevant, but it's funny you say Adam Sandler because, after 9/11, when everything sort of all changed, they had a benefit concert like immediately after 9/11. I don't know if you remember that, but I mean, it was big name musicians. I think Neil Young was there.
Yeah.
There was a lot of big names there, but there was one person that got the audience more fired up than anybody. And I don't know if you remember who that was.
I don't think so.
That was Opera Man.
Oh,
Adam Sandler did his post 9/11 Opera Man performance, and it got America. I mean, it was like a big cultural moment for America.
Yeah. You're bringing that back.
Yeah, it's just funny that you mentioned that, and then that's sort of when everything started to change. But the censorship on YouTube really started to go crazy. Actually, you know what? Speak of the devil. If you guys are over there watching on YouTube right now, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to end this stream over there because YouTube sucks. Hey, Raj,
YouTube does suck.
Suck it, bruh. Bye.
YouTube screwed me over.
Oops. I might have broke it.
Don't break it.
I did break it. Okay, now I'm going to say suck it, Raj.